What does self-advocacy look like in your mind?
Well, I think part of it, knowing for yourself that this disease is real, just knowing that there's nothing wrong with you. There's something has happened to your body. And even though you can't participate in all these things that you wanted to participate in, it's not a flaw, a personal flaw. It's just something that's happened. And this is the path you're on right now. This is your path. Make the best of it. Part of self-advocacy is simply making sure that you take care of yourself.
Welcome to the Hope and Help podcast, where we talk about science and science-based tools for fatigue and chronic illness. I'm Haylie Pomroy, #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Fast Metabolism Diet and the Assistant Director of the Integrative Medicine for the Institute of Neuro-Immune Medicine. Today, we are going to be talking about ME/CFS. I have some very incredible guests here with me today. First and foremost, I have the Dr. Nancy Klimas. She is the director of the Institute for Neuro-Immune Medicine at NSU. She is also the director of environmental medicine at the Miami VA GREC. We are so fortunate to be joined with Cort Johnson. Cort is the director and founder of Health Rising. This is a website dedicated to covering the latest research and treatment possibilities for chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, CFS, and fibromyalgia. Cort and Dr. Klimas, thank you both so much for taking time to be here with me today.
Thank you.
Okay. Great to be here.
It's going to be a good conversation on a big subject. So, Cort, I'm going to start with you. How did you become connected with the Institute?
Really, I've been connected with Nancy for a long time. Way before the Institute was developed. That was kind of the culmination of all her work. But I've been following Nancy since when in the late 80s or early 90s?
Late 80s, early 90s, from very much the beginning.
So you were 12.
Yes, this is the thing.
Because we met each other at the very first meeting that I can recall that happened in our field. I think that
yes. Well, that's the thing about Nancy. She's there from the beginning. When ME/CFS and chronic fatigue syndrome was just, people just really didn't study it.
So when you say from the beginning, is that from when we started to identify this as an actual disease process or a disorder? Because, is that what you mean when you say from the beginning?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because there really was a beginning for us. And that really had to do with these outbreaks that occurred across the country that got a lot of media attention. Chronic fatigue syndrome has been known through many names throughout its history. It's been with us probably forever. But it really gained attention in the U.S., I guess, in the mid-'80s or early '90s. And I, for instance, I wasn't diagnosed. I got chronic fatigue syndrome around 1980, and there was no chronic fatigue syndrome back then. I guess we had really kind of a confluence of these interesting outbreaks that the media covered, and it started. Yeah, they kind of really starting to research. Was
there a trigger in conversation, or was there some sort of infectious trigger when you say outbreak? Do you mean like where we started to have a more intelligent dialogue, or give me a little bit of color on that?
Yeah. It was funny because across the country, it was like in Nevada, in New York, and I think there was one in Florida. Whether or not these things were happening before, suddenly, at least doctors became aware that people were coming down with this chronic illness after an infection. And it really seemed like something was kind of sweeping across the country. And nobody's ever identified that. And I don't know, Nancy would probably have some ideas on this, whether this was something that was always happening. These outbreaks are always happening. We certainly know that ME/CFS was always happening because we know that, common pathogens can trigger it. So it's always been happening. But there seem to be these kind of outbreaks. There's Incline Village outbreak where, this little tourist town in Nevada, scores of people came down with it. And
wow.
Yeah.
And I mean, my brain goes, was there something environmental that was a trigger there? Was like when we see the individuals in the Gulf War time period, we know that there was just a big identifiable environmental insult, right, to the body, or insults, I should say. I'm fascinated by these pockets or these pods of this happening. Dr. Klimas, when they first started talking about this, or when you said it in the beginning, were the patients discounted? Was there good diagnostic abilities?
Cort would be an example of somebody who didn't get a diagnosis for at least a decade after he became ill, because in 1980, we didn't even have a case definition or a name. Okay. So there had been historically what Cort's alluding to is Icelandic disease, all these little episodes of post, usually infectious, but sometimes post war or major toxic exposure episodes where people remained ill when everyone else recovered. And so, and often they were given their own little name, So in the 80s, there were these episodes that Cort alluded to with different towns that had known like influenza epidemic or something to run through the town, and then all these people that remained ill afterwards. And it caught enough interest that the CDC and Tony Komaroff, who we hope to have a guest soon on our podcast, went to investigate to see what was going on at Incline Village. They showed up, took samples, went back to their labs, tried to figure things out. And that was sort of the beginning of paying attention. From my perspective, it happened right at the same time I started seeing my first patients, and they did not have names. So I was in the same window of time, starting to see clusters of patients coming through my clinic, not necessarily because we had an epidemic in Miami, but because I was an immunologist and the patients were hunting for answers. And so they came to see me thinking it was something in their immune system. So they identified me, it wasn't me, identifying this weird thing going on. But I published my first paper within a few months. Actually, I got my immunology paper out a few months before Dr. Levy got his out at UCSF, and he teased me about it because we've had the same findings, which there was something wrong with the part of the immune system that could clear an infection. So
I want to, can I just punctuate that for a minute? That back, when was that paper?
Like 89 to 91.
89.
We were publishing our first things. 91, I think, was the paper that he was alluding to. So identifying that there's something wrong with the immune system that allows the body to clear this infection or episode. Yeah.
Wow.
Rigorously attack an infection when it comes on board. So
wow.
That was interesting observation, but that made a bunch of people who were looking at different clusters get together informally and say, hey, we're doing something. And then it was really Tony Komaroff, I think, and Dr. Blaschi, who was at the NIH at the time, that said, hey, we need to have a meeting and name this thing and create a case definition. And they really started a way that a field could start by at least identifying what we thought we were looking at in a way that we could all begin to do research with a common diagnosis.
Hi, it's Haylie Pomroy, your host. Did you know that the world's largest single environmental health risk is air pollution? That's right. We are being bombarded by toxins every single day because they are in the very air we breathe. But don't worry, there is hope. Whether you are dealing with fatigue, mast cell activation, an autoimmune disorder, long COVID, viral reactivation, inflammation, anxiety, or depression, all of it can feel overwhelming. I know firsthand what it feels like to fight to find real impactful solutions to your health struggles. I have been where you are. But one thing is crystal clear. We must address the environmental and toxic burden in our bodies. Let me help you do that. Go to HayliePomroy.com/detox and download my free Detox Decoded Masterclass. I will teach you nutrition and natural therapies to help your body eliminate toxins. Let's give you a fighting chance. I cannot wait to see you there.
I'm sitting here and both you, Cort, and Dr. Klimas, I'm sitting here just going, we're talking 34 plus years ago. And we still, in our institute, see people come in 10, 20 doctors later that haven't had an adequate diagnosis or even are believed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm just floored. I mean, I'm just, it's kind of, it just sunk in for a minute, you know?
Well, Cort would tell you, because he's the one that goaded me all the time. One of the most frustrating things early on was the split in the type of people doing the work that were between essentially psychosomatic medicine and biologic underpinnings of an illness, more in the frame of the way I might have framed it. And we were sort of set against each other. We were often actually debating each other on stages. And I think we wasted 10 long years of research just trying to refute that this wasn't, quote, all in your head. So it was really a hard time. And eventually we got past that. We're way past that now. We've all agreed, yeah, let's go on and move on. But Cort, I remember Cort, challenging me as an investigator and as a clinician to be an advocate. And I was saying, you know what? Doctors aren't supposed to be advocates. Scientists are supposed to be able to stand back,
be impartial
and judge the data. And when you start into advocacy, you might, not be able to do your job as an investigator. And then eventually he convinced me that the only people that could move us past this spot were the academic community, if not necessarily the research community, but the academic and clinical community that had to step up and do something. So when we formed our professional organization, the IACFS, we were supposed to be promoting research, clinical guidelines, that kind of thing. But somewhere along the way, we had this amazing event happen where we recognized our power as clinicians and as experts to make a difference. And it actually happened in Norway, Cort. You might remember this, but in Norway, we were so broke as an organization that if they paid us to go somewhere, so we'd say, you pay us to come, we'll put on a conference while we're there, but we need to meet face to face. So we need to pay in a conference room. So we would go anywhere in the world, just pay us to come, not individually, just the organization needs a place to meet and someone pay our expenses to get there so we can have a board meeting. So we were doing that in Norway. And the Minister of Health came to the meeting and she completely did a 180 for their country after this meeting. She said, oh my God, it's real. It's biologic. We've been putting these people in psych units. We're going to stop. And
wow.
Today we were in our board meeting and I was probably the most advocacy minded person on the board at the time. And I'm saying, see, it's knowledge that changes things.
Right.
We're knowledgeable and we have to stand up with our knowledge and make policy changes. This will change lives more than anything else we can do in our lifetime. Cort was the guy standing behind me in the years before that saying, you're not loud enough. You're not taking a big enough stand. Get out there on that limb. Why aren't you out there talking for us more? And I'm like, well, why am I not? He made me think, that how do you balance the balance of being a good scientist, a good clinician, and the best patient advocate you can be. And that there is a way to do that.
And a person that disseminates science too. I mean, isn't hoarding, right? The data. And that's heartbreaking when we see that. Cort, I keep hearing from Dr. Klimas that you were driving, right? Driving that. What inspired you?
He's a pushy guy. I'm going to just...
Well,
where does it come from? We don't do these things for no reason. What was the motivation? What's the inspiration? What drives you? Because it's a lot of energy and focus to work on your own health journey. Why were you so vested in the advocacy being there?
Well, I mean, kind of how can you not really? I mean, this thing totally changed my life. And if not this, then what?
Right.
I mean, it just seems like a natural extension. And I've always been, I'm really interested in the research and everything. I'm also fascinated in the advocacy aspect and the organizational aspect and the with regards to the NIH and, why we're not getting the funding we're not getting and what the block is there. And
When did you start Health Rising? When did you start the website?
I first started a website called Phoenix Rising,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was the mid '90s, and Phoenix Rising, and
At that point, had you had a diagnosis, or were you working through this syndrome and not identified?
no, actually, in the mid '90s, I was running away from the diagnosis. I had heard about chronic fatigue syndrome. I had heard it was a dead end, and I did not want to be associated with anything like that. But then, it's a little sketchy for me on the time. But at some point, I got it, and I started, and I'm always really interested in the research. So I'm looking all over the place, all over the internet for the answers, and I'm seeing the same kind of simple explanations or overviews showing up everywhere, and not really getting anywhere. So I started a website in early 2000s. It's a front page website, if you remember. I made my own website. And I just started reviewing the literature and trying to translate the literature so that I can understand it, so that other people can understand it. But always, I mean, advocacy is just key. It's just key,
Right.
and I really wonder whether the development of the CFS in me and this kind of real, rigorous, professional, scientific outlook. We're going to have conferences. We're going to have a professional resource organization. I wonder if that's really, really what's kind of held us apart from diseases like fibromyalgia. They don't have anything like that.
Right.
We have centers. We have Nancy Center. There are a few other centers. We have some private funders, and it's just this. Even despite all the fatigue and all that, it's a very active community. It's really a very active community.
And a lot of brilliant, powerful people. I mean,
Yes.
I do agree with you that organizing, right? There's power in numbers, and there's effectiveness in organizing. And so I think of all the people that have started to listen to this podcast, and they're maybe starting to identify with some of the symptom profile, or they've been rejected or turned away or not getting things. I'd love to hear from both of you. Someone that feels like they need to seek possibly a diagnosis, somebody that's out there going, wow, and we're seeing it with long COVID. I'll just throw that one in there, right? They're saying, I something had changed in my body, something, the way that my body responds, the way that my body reacts. What would you suggest that they do? What's their next step to become part of the organization, to talk to their doc? Like, what's the next step for them?
I'm going to say that as much as I hate Dr. Google, and I do, there are very good places using the internet to learn as much as you can. And the Cort's website is perhaps the best source I know of well-written, crystallized, up-to-date knowledge on what the illness is like and where the science stands and what we've learned, and things people have tried to do or that are evidence-based, things that are experiential. So he's that's why I'm so keen to have him on our podcast, just because Cort, I don't know anybody else that could take really complicated concepts and make them understandable and clear, and then get them down in words on paper or on the internet on screen.
What's the website?
Healthrising.org, I believe.
.org. Okay. .org, everybody. So Dr. Klimas, I love the way you said that, because oftentimes there's a big divide between even the knowledge base. If we have a physician or a practitioner that has this knowledge base and the accessibility to the patient, and individuals like yourself that bridge the gap, that help people like me understand, what's going on in the body. And I think also empathize, because you've been in their shoes, seeking support and help. So Cort, I want to ask you this question, which is, what does self-advocacy look like in your mind?
Well, I think part of it, knowing for yourself that this disease is real and serious, and being able to, just knowing that there's nothing wrong with you, there's something has happened to your body. And even though you can't participate in all these things that you wanted to participate in, it's not a flaw, a personal flaw. It's just something that's happened, and this is the path you're on right now. This is your path,
Right.
And make the best of it. And so, part of self-advocacy is simply making sure that you take care of yourself. That you don't that you put that first and foremost, and then self-advocacy is also being a stand for this disease with your doctor. That
Yes.
this is a real disease, and a lot of doctors are getting that now. And there is a lot of information on Health Rising about fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, and we have a page called how to prove that your illness is not depression, or how to prove that fibromyalgia is a serious disease, and we have a list of really neat. It's when you're done with that, you
have the right verbiage. I read something the other day that said you're not looking for a practitioner that believes you. You're looking for a practitioner that's a fierce advocate for your truth. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So if you're having to convince someone, it's not a teammate that you're looking for, right? You're looking for someone that when you and that's what's really unique about the Institute. And I know that you've both have shared this, but that being outside and my own health struggles, and Dr. Klimas, when you said 10 years of research was lost debating this, I got chills, because I can tell you so much getting help was lost in all the effort that I made to get somebody to believe that I needed help. Right. Yes. And I think of all that time, work, effort, and Googling, right, to say, look, I have enough evidence that shows that that my concerns are valid, and you should believe me, which is just crazy. Yeah. But
start with that. That's terrible.
You do. And but it's so true. And how much energy, effort, time, money, resources that it takes just to get you into the threshold of beginning to be on the journey of either creating a new homeostasis or towards health.
Hey folks, Nancy Klimas. Thanks for listening to the podcast series. We have a lot going on, and a lot of research going on in ME/CFS, in Gulf War illness, in long COVID, Parkinson's disease. You'll find that we have a number of trials going on, clinical trials and different types of studies. To learn more, just go to our webpage on the research tab at nova.edu/NIM, Neuro-Immune Medicine, and you'll see everything that's going on right now. We even have patient conferences every year. We have one coming right up. So check out our webpage. Thanks.
Dr. Klimas, what does self-advocacy look like to you?
First, being willing to fire a doctor. That's really important.
Yes.
Dr. Klimas, my daughter was in the hospital. Yeah, my daughter was in the hospital, and you told me to fire my doctor, or you gave me permission to fire my doctor when I asked. And I, on behalf of this mama, I cannot thank you enough. And boy, did I get a gem of a doctor afterwards. I mean, she was lovely, but I was afraid, and I'm pretty ornery. So thank you for saying that to all of us.
I mean, you're already sick. You have an illness that just saps you of your energy. You've got about 15, 20 minutes if you're good of concentration. You shouldn't have to spend it fighting with your doctor. You should be able to, doctors are supposed to have listening skills and compassion and all those things. And you're not likely to change the inner workings of a person if they're not showing their compassion. You're not going to make them get compassionate. I mean, you can't. That's not your fault, right? So,
wow.
So lose the ones that don't make you feel like you're on a path towards getting better. What's the point of that? You're just spending money and getting big, expensive workups, and it's not moving you. So that's one thing. Another thing is learn as much as you can. As irritating as it is to have a patient come in with 12 pages, single-spaced stuff that they want you to read before you even get to talk. At least it's somebody that's learning something, Right. I would be happy to do a whole podcast on how to use your doctor's time wisely. But at least I know that when I'm seeing someone that's, I have this patient with long COVID right now that's really challenging me. And I think I'm on top of things. Boy, do I know stuff. He knows stuff like right before it's published. I'm like, wait a minute. No fair. You can't hold me accountable for science that hasn't been presented yet.
That's exciting though.
But
Yeah.
he really challenges me, and I understand he's advocating for his son, and he's amazing, And so, anyway, that's an point. Is one is being willing to get rid of people that aren't helping you, and then building your team in a sensible way. One of the things I find, because there's only so many ME/CFS experts or long COVID experts or environmental toxicology experts in the country, if you counted those in terms of lots of clinical expertise, I'm going to say you probably have less than 200 people like that in the whole,
Right.
Trying to take care of, an epidemic of post-viral illness or post-environmental toxic illness. We should have lots more. But there are people who are solidly trained in it. And those are integrative medicine doctors. They go through a lot of training to try to understand how everything's knit together. And you can find integrative medicine doctors. They are everywhere. So I usually say, let's start by getting your quarterback to be the integrative medicine doctor. And the other is, if you can find one, or if you have a primary care doctor that you love, then great, stick with them. If somebody's listening to you and learning on your journey, you got a great doctor. You don't have to change that, But if you are looking fresh for somebody because you just fired the one that wasn't helping, well, then look to somebody that's got some decent education on how complicated illnesses are glued together and how to unravel them.
One thing I would recommend for somebody who's new to this, well, to anybody actually, is a podcast called Unraveled. It's produced by Dr. Ruhoy and Dr. Kaufman. They're two ME/CFS experts. They just talk about everything. I think they've done like 40 or 50 episodes.
Nice.
And there's just a wealth of information on there. So that's a great place to go.
And they help you. So we do this in our community. We do this program that we call it Request for Care. We help people get organized before their doctor's appointment. If they want to have, like you said, Dr. Klimas, a note of volumes of data behind it, how to distill that data and create a cover letter that pulls out the salient points so that you can maximize your visit. And we take our community, we took about 2,300 people just recently through creating a request for care before they go in, whether it's a physical or, something grander than that. But both of you brought up something that I think, I'm hoping this is something that came out of the pandemic. I think that integrative medicine has been shoved to the forefront because of the possibility for complexity of treatment in the complexity of what we're seeing right now happening in the bodies. I think we used to take, a more reductionistic approach or more maybe systems approach like cardiology, orthopedics, and say, well, we'll fix a bone or we'll fix the heart. But in these complex diseases like CFS and long COVID, the complexity of what's happening in the body is requiring complexity of care. Mm-hmm. And so I mean, there's this converging where something's got to change, right? We've got to treat the patient more. I don't know if I use the word holistically, but more whole body at least, or all systems on board, right? And I want to ask both of you, I know you saw it coming with COVID, right? Or with this particular.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah. It was like, oh, my God. It's going to hit us big time. And look what happened.
Right. I love your response. You didn't know I was going to ask you that question. I was
just looking at our team going, man, we are already booked and we're about to
get hammered
at 5 or 10 times greater volume than we're already managing. So,
and this whole thing about, in 10 to 14 days, as long as you survive it, it's going to be, you're going to be done. And watching, I had the opportunity to watch everybody at the Institute and watching you guys just go, What did we learn with ME/CFS? Is it that just allowed us to kind of catapult to the forefront with our long COVID patients?
For me, it was just amazing because when COVID hit, we all knew long COVID was coming.
Well, but I hear you say that, but so many people said, that no, what are you talking about? I mean, I'm out here, right?
Oh yeah.
You guys all saw it like crystal clear.
Oh yeah. There's no doubt.
Tell me why?
I mean,
why?
You never know until you know. But
right.
But it was a big infectious illness, and ME/CFS has always been associated with post-infectious illness. So it just followed right along. It just made so much sense. It's really so. But my question was, how similar is it going to end up being in the research field? Are the findings going to line up? Is it going to be different because it's a coronavirus? Are things is going to end up looking really different? That wouldn't be so good for ME/CFS. We'd really like to have them be very similar because we want to get.
So we've learned. We've had some learnings.
Yeah, we want to learn. We want to learn from this. And what's just really astonishing and really made me very happy is just how similar these diseases have shown up to be. I mean, from herpes virus reactivation to metabolic problems to blood vessel problems to immune to the brain. I mean, I almost couldn't have had it any better, any closer. But I think the long COVID field is still really catching up to the ME/CFS field. I think we're way ahead in a lot of areas. And
I think and I think you guys will be, will reach down and pull people up through research, right? Because there's people that are just starting to say, there seems to be some sort of an inflammatory or neuroinflammatory response or an immune modulation response. And I watch you guys all go, duh, yeah.
To me, it's been really, I'm sure there are some differences, but to me, it's been really nice to see the kind of large similarities, which makes me hope that it will help us understand long COVID. But the one thing that I've been surprised at is that I thought, because ME/CFS was quickly identified with long COVID. I thought that would lead to more funding at the NIH, and it just hasn't.
Right.
The same thing. We have the Recover Network, which is a $1.15 billion and $500 million new money coming in, spent for long COVID, which is, to be real, we in ME/CFS, our average year for a long time was $3 to $6 million of funding for the entire field. I mean, wow. And a big year when they brought up the centers, we might have nudged it up to about, we've had a maximum of about $20 million a year in any given year of funding. And then along comes long COVID with, $1.5 billion in committed funds. And there's a tremendous amount of work, which is so exciting. And for the longest time, we've been saying to the NIH, if you put set aside money, they will come. And then they said, no, there's money there, just apply, you'll get it. And it's just not been true. And a few times when there's been set aside, if there's a center award being out or they say, here's an extra $3 million, they get a lot more applications when there's the perception by the investigators that they might get funded. But with the Recovery Network, there wasn't a large university in the country that was left out of that application. 200 applications that involved multiple institutions went at the Recovery Network funds. 248, I think it was. Like how many large institutions with medical schools are there? They all went in. Everybody went in for a Recovery Network application. So think about what that means. We got new money, a lot of money. It just swept a vast number of new investigators that weren't there before. Now, I will say, as one of the old investigators, it left us out because there was a decision not to compare ME/CFS to long COVID in that money. So those of us that put applications in that had said, hey, what we have to offer is all this experience and data and biorepositories and all this stuff that we know about ME/CFS, wouldn't you like to have a comparator illness? And they said, we can't compare them. Why? You want to know this, Cort? Duration of illness. These people with long COVID, they're really better. So your patients with long COVID, we can't come in with ME/CFS. They have to be pre-2020. So already they have at least 3 or 4 years of illness. How are we going to compare them to someone with only 1 or 2 years of illness? And that was a decision made that we were not going to be allowed in at least in that first week. And I think that was perhaps an idea that it was going to go away, that long COVID was going to burn out and these people are going to get better and they're going to be different. Well, now it's 2024 and the 2020 people are still sick, right? 4 years of illness, now they're long duration illness. And all of a sudden, there's actually quite a bit more interest in comparing to ME/CFS. So our study we're doing long COVID to ME/CFS, that's funded by the CDC, not by the NIH. It's a good study intended to compare ME/CFS to long COVID. That is its intent, its main hypothesis. Test what are the similarities and differences. But it took the CDC actually to fund that one. And
wow.
We had applied through the Recovery Network, and that was what our critique showed was that
that's an example of advocacy. That 1.15 billion came from Congress. It did not come from the NIH. It came from a congressman who had, I've heard that he played a big role. He has a form of long COVID. Yeah.
Right. So knowing someone that has ME/CFS so actually it's an interesting study. This was Lenny Jason's study that said when you're looking for a doctor that knows something about ME/CFS, they didn't learn it in medical school. They learned it because they have a family member with ME/CFS.
Absolutely.
They polled all the doctors to see who knew anything, and the people who knew anything were the people who actually had a family member. So
that had to go back to school, literally go back. Yeah.
Yeah, they had to figure it out. And on COVID, the same way, when you talk about a congressman and funding, I remember very early in court, you might remember this. Remember Hyde and Kennedy, the two people that probably shouldn't be in the same elevator together? Senator
Byron,
Kennedy.
Byron Hyde?
No, not
yes.
Byron Hyde, the Congress, Hyde.
Oh, okay.
Hyde, the most right-wing one side, and Kennedy, the most left-wing the other side, co-sponsored a bill for ME/CFS because they had family, their staff members have family. In some way or other, they were connected. And we had a hearing a long time ago that was co-sponsored by Hyde and Kennedy in Congress. And I said, well, the one thing that brings bipartisan support to anything, and it's going to be around health and medicine, So right now, it's about the hardest time you can imagine to get something seen by both sides of the House or the Senate right now, but they are doing things in bipartisan ways for veterans with environmental toxic, the PASC Act, that was huge, and they had to get that through. Well, this recovery network was the same way. To get $1.15 billion into a budget to go after an illness in its earliest years, that was a really big accomplishment.
So, Cort, on healthrising.org, I know that there's a lot of information and data. Is there a way that people can take an action step and become involved in advocacy?
We frequently have. We're kind of like a funnel.
Got it.
So we promote like the Solve-Me initiative, which legislates, which works in the legislative sphere, which is where you can really get the most done. When we just actually this week we're participating in Advocacy Week. There's anybody with long COVID who's listening. There's a long COVID moonshot bill that's just been coming out of Bernie Sanders' office.
Can you say that a long COVID what?
Moonshot. I think it's asking for $1 billion a year.
Okay.
In funding. And so far as I know, long COVID does not. It's a problem with these diseases. They affect so many different systems that they don't know where to put them. ME/CFS does not have a home in the NIH. It's not affiliated with an institute, and neither is long COVID. So the idea is to build a post-infectious disease institute in which we can study ME/CFS, long COVID, POTS, all these diseases. If you think about it, you don't study diabetes across 15 or 16 different institutes or heart disease. You have one institute, but that's how ME/CFS is being studied, and these other diseases, the post-Lyme disease. So the Sanders bill, from the ME/CFS perspective, is flawed in that it does not include anything other than long COVID. Does not include any other post-infectious diseases. So we're going to be pushing to
shift that. And are you finding that individuals that had ME/CFS prior to COVID that then became categorized in the long COVID category are able to get long COVID support or research, or are they taken out of those research opportunities because they were previously diagnosed with ME/CFS?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, they are kryptonite or whatever.
I know.
They need
They're
clean
excluded. Yeah.
non-COVID diagnosis. That's all they want.
That's been really frustrating for me to watch because we've seen people that were doing well or doing better that get, I don't know exactly the right terminology. You both will have to help me, but get a new infection, it reactivates a historical infection or a co-infection, and they're back to square one or square zero, and they can't get the support from. It's like, oh, you already had that before. You were just having a couple good moments, and we're not going to classify it over in here. That's hard for me to watch in our chat rooms and in our communities.
Well, one great thing about the Recover Network is they opened up all these long COVID clinics. I mean, Nancy was talking about just the sheer mass of doctors who now know about long COVID and therefore must know something about ME/CFS.
Well, it took 10 years. It took 10 years. I wrote this down, 10 years of fighting over whether to believe the chronic illness, post-viral chronic illness issue wasn't psychosomatic, right? So it took 10 years, long before COVID, our pandemic hit, right? Of debating whether ME/CFS was true or not, or biological or not, that fight was brought, right to the doorstep when we had the pandemic. And so, I feel like some of that's why they're able to just pop up these clinics, or not pop up these clinics, but create these treatment centers, because there isn't I don't know, there's still going on out there. There isn't it's psychosomatic and it's just all in your head and you need to get, more rest and exercise more. I at least when we're out there talking, we hear a lot about that, which leads me to my last question. Mm-hmm. And I would love to hear from each of you, why do you still feel like so many patients are misunderstood or misdiagnosed? Why is this still happening? The research is solid.
Nancy was talking, it took 10 years. I think she took 10 years in the research field to stop focusing on psychosomatic stuff and move to biology. But I think doctors are another case entirely. I just think it's been my sense is that it's been much slower for doctors to get that this is a real illness. I think, they're probably very busy. It's hard to keep up with everything. They weren't taught, they weren't taught about ME/CFS. Whatever they were taught about it wasn't good. They don't have good treatment options, so they don't like to, they don't like. I'm sure it's difficult seeing ME/CFS patients with all these different symptoms, and it probably just drives you nuts.
There's a super straight line between high cholesterol and a statin, or elevated hemoglobin A1C and metformin. You're right. I love that. I love that point, Cort. It's not a straight line. It takes a ton of creativity and a ton of work.
It's a lot of work. It takes, as Nancy knows, it takes a lot of work to really properly evaluate an ME/CFS patient. You can't just do a lab test and just, there are many lab tests you can do, but there's not like a definitive lab test.
I love what you said. I don't feel like it gives an excuse, for a physician or a practitioner not, heroically coming and throwing their cape on and identifying and validating. But that's what I want. But it gives us as the patient population a little bit of understanding, and then we can become better advocates and better communicators. Dr. Klimas, will you add to that? Why we have tears in the clinic when you guys start pulling blood, because people say, what, you're going to actually do something from a biology perspective and actually ask my body if it's okay?
It's discouraging to me. My first patient that I saw, and I related this story already in the podcast, but she'd seen so many doctors and she burst into tears when I said, there's something really wrong with you. And that still happens today all the time.
I know.
It's still been to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 doctors before they get to a doctor that is willing to do something to demonstrate that there's something actually really wrong. And this is amazing. Think about this case, okay? POTS, you referred to POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia, dysautonomia. It's a problem where people's blood pressures go up and down and their pulse races and slows down, but their blood pressure can be really low. How many times have I got a call from a patient in the ER where their blood pressure is 60 over palp, 60/30. I mean, anybody with their eyes closed in an ER would say, this is not okay, right? But they give the diagnosis ME/CFS and they send them out without even volume, without even fluids. And I'm like, no, anybody walks in the ER with such a low blood pressure they can't stand up, they get an IV line and they get their volume replaced. It wouldn't matter what you called it. It always happens that way. But ME/CFS, if they mention they have the disease, they're like, get out of my ER. That means not only is the doctor not willing to think, they're not willing to believe their own eyes. Okay.
Right.
Isn't that something? Here's something you can see, you can feel, you can prove. Here's something that is really wrong. Why don't you actually look at your own numbers that you just drew and said, oh, well, that's not okay. But instead it's like, how did they fake that? You know, how did they fake a low blood pressure? How did they fake syncope? I don't know. How did they fake fainting dead out because your pressure was so low? I'm just shocked at that. I mean, it's all the time. I'm like, come on, guys. But you ask, what can we do? So, you know, I've been at this for a long time. As you heard Cort and I talk, I've been at this more than 40 years. And God knows how many hundreds and hundreds of lectures I've given in CME courses and, you know, TED Talks and anything I can think of to do. I've done it, you know, and so have all my colleagues. I mean, Cindy Bateman, she's like extraordinary. I can just tick them all off. It's not enough. Okay. So one of the things that we require in our thinking is to get out of medical school, what test do you have to pass? Is there an MECF question on that test? Because if there is, they will teach it, you know? So instead of coming at it, we come at it every way. I mean, everything's case-based teaching these days. So we've created cases and we've handed it to medical school curricula people and say, here's a case ready to go. Here's all the discussion points. Here's the data. Here's the evidence. Ta-da, it's ready to go. Patch it into your curricula. But if it's not on the board exam, so then you go to the board people and say, why isn't ME/CFS on the board exam? And now you're starting to begin to see it. Certainly long COVID's even starting to beginning to creep in on the board exams. Then the curricular development people say, oh my God, we don't have something that's on the board. And then they have to come out and find the content. And we've already made their content. So here, have some content. So
I love it.
Yeah, that's medical school. But Cort was referring to something different. One of the reasons why doctors are so stubborn, in the 90s, there was a magazine cover that called this the yuppie flu, and they identified it as white unified woman.
Yeah.
We have not gotten past this stupid yuppie flu thing. It was wrong then, completely wrong. There was no data to support what they said in this, you know, lay press thing, but they said it, and they said it on the cover, and it became,
and it was never retracted.
This is it.
Right.
And we dealt with this stupid yuppie flu thing for another 30 years. It's just crazy. It just makes me mad to this very moment. Who said that? Why did you ruin so many people's lives by creating some stupid name and putting it out there and then putting it on the front page of your magazine? So, because doctors say, oh, you mean the yuppie flu? Huh.
Oh, no, yeah.
Those are, doctors, my generation and younger, that are never went back to relearn anything, and they're just working off their 40 CMEs a year, and they're not necessarily, keeping up.
Yeah. Well, my goal is to give a massive microphone, a massive megaphone, if you will, to people like the two of you, and just continue the conversation in a way that allows people to feel believed, to find hope, to give pearls of wisdom so that they can get help. And I cannot thank both of you enough. You know, Dr. Klimas, all of your work and inspiration. I mean, you not only have elevated your work and your research, but you're dragging all of us along with you. And I can't thank you enough for that.
Whether you want to or not.
What a journey that I'm honored to be on. And Cort, I've just been looking forward to meeting you. I've dug through your website. I've forwarded people so many things. I cannot believe you and your dogs. I love your dogs. I cannot believe, don't even want to know how many I have. I can't believe all the work you've been able to manifest, all of the content you've been able to manifest, and the distillation of such a complex issue into content that people like myself can really absorb and take and help other people with. So thank you both. Please promise me you'll be back on. This was a great conversation about ME/CFS. I was shocked. I had chills. I am enraged. And I am inspired and motivated to keep the conversation going. So thank you. I will hope to see you both on the podcast again soon.
Thank you, Haylie. And remember, it's healthrising.org. This is Cort's webpage. And I don't know any better place to send a patient that's interested in this illness to learn in a very up-to-date and comprehensive way what's going on in this field.
And Cort, I will make
Thank
sure
you.
that we put a hot link on all of these blog posts too, and also in our social media. I want to make sure that people have easy access to what can make a profound difference in their lives. So thank you.
Yes, we cover, I start out with chronic fatigue syndrome, ME/CFS, and then fibromyalgia, and now long COVID, POTS, dysautonomia. We're covering the spectrum of illnesses. So if anyone listening is has those, then you can probably find some stuff.
And I would love to have you back on to have the POTS conversation. I don't know if you're up on this, but it is the number one subject trending on TikTok right now. So we are seeing so many young female and male. Yeah. Crazy, right? So many young male and female post-COVID. Yeah. But individuals like you, this is not new news. There's so much vast learning in the millions of clinical hours that you and your colleagues can pull together in that knowledge base that can get us, through the struggles, hopefully quicker than all of the people that legacied before. So
Right.
Upwards and onwards. Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much, you guys. This was great.
There.
Thank you.
Bye, Cort. Thank you so much.